Buenos días a todos. Good morning, everybody. It's quite a delight being here with friends as usual. Es un gusto para nosotros como Arpel trabajar con nuestros amigos y darle la bienvenida a nuestros amigos de Ipieca, API y IOPG en Europa. Trabajamos juntos en el ejercicio de analizar qué significa el reporte de sostenibilidad para la industria de petróleo y gas. So we are basically working together to put a series to help the industry build resilience around sustainability reporting and how critical it is. This is the last of a series of 3. We are very, very honored to have today. We are going to do the analysis about how frameworks work and how companies do strategies and prepare for this. Para todos, muchísimas gracias por unirse y nos da una alegría inmensa darles un saludo desde acá. Nos acompaña hoy, tenemos un grupo espectacular de expertos, todas unas mujeres increíbles, realmente van a disfrutar mucho su presentación. Vamos a empezar con Birgit, ella hace parte del equipo de reporte de Ipieca, discúlpeme, de Equinor, y ella va a traer su experiencia y a la vez es la directora quien lleva todo lo que es el grupo de reporte en Ipieca. Tenemos la dicha de contar con María Luisa, ella es la Sustainability Leader en Geopark, quien es una experta en este tema y ha navegado todos los mares de los reportes y yo creo que vamos a aprender muchísimo de la implementación y de su experiencia. Contamos con Grace y con Lou. Grace es de API en Estados Unidos y con Lou hace parte del equipo de Ipieca con gran experiencia en todo lo que tiene que ver con reporte. Entonces, con esto, vamos al comienzo. Birgit, welcome.
Hi, everyone. So I wanted to start off with saying reporting. Why? Why is reporting important? So this slide is telling the story that reporting can be a tool for transparency and accountability. Your report is a tool for communication and for being transparent and accountable on matters that build trust in your company for all stakeholders. And it is a document that can showcase the value of your company. Good reporting strengthens your company's position, not just in the market, but also in society, in a community, and among people. I will also use the simple term knowledge is power, meaning in this case that gathering and communicating information that brings us to strategy. So general foundation for strategy is knowledge that you use as a basis for decision making. Investors state that they want this benchmarking that they can also achieve with having reports that they can do benchmarking based on that information. They also have specifically talked about the specific indicators for oil and gas industries as information that they use and find useful. Comparison between companies and benchmarking is central for investors, which are one of the key stakeholders. But within sustainability, risk identification has always been one driver for sustainability reporting, since it's thinking more holistically about risks and mapping risks. What can affect my company negatively? What can disturb my investments? And for this long-term business resilience, I would say also from a personal belief is that sustainability reporting is a place where we can learn more about the company's long-term business resilience. It gives us insight into different aspects of the business, and it reflects the position in a broader context. And with that in mind, I would like to go to the next slide and promote and use this opportunity to show that you have a tool in the toolbox. The sustainability reporting guidance is a guidance that really can bring from scratch, whether it's for early reporters doing it for the first time, from start to end. This guidance, with the support from Ipieca, API, and IOGP, it can give you that stepwise guide from start to finish. It includes a module-based approach that also allows you to go into specific topics. So if you're a more experienced reporter, it's also an excellent place to go and look for more specific information in the modules. For example, a module related to climate change and energy, on safety, health, and security. And then also, it is an excellent way to find more sources to guide you also to more information as needed. And in general, also helps you structuring your report. So let's dig into that a little bit more, and we can go to the next slide. This tells a bit more what is inside the guidance. With this guidance, you can understand which key points you are welcome to address per topic, which are those that are most relevant, because this guidance has been built on decades, I would say, of experience, making sure that you address those crucial items per topic, and also that you can look for those indicators that traces performance. And as mentioned, when it comes to further information for each of these topics, we will then have the availability to look at references and links. And I would say that using this guidance, it's something that we as a company in Equinor as well is going back to and back to. It's really providing us with a standpoint which understands our industry. And I think that's one of the crucial ways to communicate to you today, is also that this road has been, someone has walked it before. And please use this guidance as you see the most fitted for your use. So I can also mention that if we go to the next slide, that yes, you do have the reporting guidance, but we also, every single year, we do a survey. And in this annual survey, we also ask which frameworks our industry use to guide, each company uses to guide their sustainability reporting. And within that survey, we also get those feedbacks and lists to make sure we are updated as well on which frameworks that are enlightening our company, member companies' way of doing sustainability reporting. We will have a look at one of these questions that are in the survey, but also, before we move on to the next slide, I'm mentioning that this interactive dashboard that we also have in our web pages, Ipieca web pages, you can also find this historical data sets. So in the survey itself that we will post as well on web pages, you can go into more details per question. But interactive dashboard will actually give you historical data sets that bring you several years back. So we can move to the next slide to get a bit of more information about which frameworks that are mentioned. And you can see in this slide that as well as in 2022 and 2023, and this result, which is looking at in the big table, it's the 2024 results. And what we see there is that with many of us, the member companies used as a sustainability reporting guidance that I've talked about in the previous slides. But we also see the Global Reporting Initiative, and specifically here as well, the oil and gas standard. That also gives you a great insight into which indicators for the sector that, from an impact perspective, can also secure that you can showcase the performance in your sustainability reporting. And then TCFD is also one of those frameworks that have been guiding our member companies when it comes to climate reporting. And again, this is to have comparison ground, but also moving towards a more harmonized framework that can work, so we can actually look at information in a context that more and more stakeholders will understand the reporting. I can also point out in this slide that SASB, which is now also collaborating or setting together their standard with ISSB. And SASB has also been putting the stakeholders for investors and also the risk-based perspective in center for how they build their framework. In the GRI, it is more focusing on the impact that you have on society, people, and planet. So that's the huge difference. So I can then move on to the next, but this is then also information that will showcase what information you can look up on your own as well. On our web pages for Ipieca, you can have this look on the historical data sets as well and see the consistency here, for example, of how crucial we see over years that the Ipieca sustainability reporting guidance has been, and also GRI as a consistent one, and TCFD, which really digs deeper into the climate and reporting of climate. So by that, I'm going to also, because this is a picture just showcasing the dashboard, the interactive dashboard. And then I also already now pointed out some key reporting frameworks. The GRI, I can mention it again, it's been a very crucial reporting framework in Norwegian context. It was also referenced in the law for sustainability reporting. So the mandatory reporting that we did as a stock exchange a company on the stock exchange in Norway, GRI Global Reporting Initiative was referenced as the framework that we should report in accordance with. For the SASB, as I mentioned, has a different kind of angle in, but it's definitely then looking at the stakeholders from a market perspective, capital markets, and investors, sorry. But you also see the United Nations with the Global Compact, the SDGs, Sustainability Development Goals. These are all guidance as well. And I have to also point out the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, because also from the GRI perspective, Greenhouse Gas Protocol has been crucial, getting that methodology and more standardized way of reporting emissions. We also see that the upcoming and also already in use, the ESRS is referencing and using the Greenhouse Gas Protocol as a crucial factor into securing that we standardize the way we are reporting. Okay, and I will also point out one more thing in this screenshot or the slide we're looking at, and the ISSB. We also now see this emerging scene where you have local regulation adopting ISSB. They're doing some changes as well into the national regulation, but they're using ISSB as a way of starting their sustainability reporting on specifics, for example, the climate, which we can go to the next slide. I think we have one slide that moves into some details of that. Yeah. For the S1 and S2. So I've mentioned GRI a couple of times now. They've been there since the 1997 they were founded, and it is a comprehensive framework. And I have spoken about that they really care for the impact assessment and making sure that you address your impact on people and society and planet. And the ISSB, I pointed out that you have a bit more of a capital market perspective on it than investors. These are then therefore carefully developed indicators that will speak clearly to that group of stakeholders. And then we really, in Equinor, for example, we really have been exploring the directive from EU, European Sustainability Reporting Standard, and that has been a really new step for us, and especially on the way that we structure the report, and maybe creating a more comparison reports across the different companies and also across industries. And then I think that we can just sum up on the frameworks and say that even though I've now told you a bit about the differences between these frameworks, I would definitely say that the stakeholders that are involved is a broad group of stakeholders that have played into the development of all three. But they all also have that in common, that they want to enhance the consistency, the comparability, and the reliability of sustainability reporting. And they do the facilitation that we can have informed decision-making, and they promote transparency. Let's move on to the next slide. And we're getting close to an end for my presentation. Every company is a bit different. So we all have to go and look at what information is most relevant and what's most relevant for your stakeholders. So making sure that that's also in the heart of and the center of your steps towards a very relevant sustainability reporting, that's the first step. Determine what information that is most relevant, and it's most needed also for your stakeholders. And then it's also easier to look and identify which frameworks to best align with your company's objectives and the stakeholder needs. I then want to end and wrap it up with the first slide in a way. We have a repetition of the slide that I started out with. So the next slide is then going back to what I started with. Sustainability reporting is a fantastic tool for your company. So please use it. Use that opportunity. It's a tool to make that trust and create more awareness and have the transparency and accountability, building that trust between you as a company and the society around you, for all other stakeholders, investors as alike. And I would also then like to thank you for having me in this meeting and having an opportunity to communicate these thoughts about sustainability reporting. And I'll now give the word to Grace from ABI.
Thanks, Birgitta. So like Birgitta mentioned, it is really important for individual companies when deciding what framework they use to report to consider their individual needs of their most important stakeholders. However, we're increasingly seeing mandatory reporting regulations come into play, and those regulations often dictate explicitly what companies need to report and how they need to report them, leaving a lot less flexibility for companies to decide how they pursue sustainability reporting. And sometimes these mandatory regulations will actually go and adopt other existing frameworks that were some of the ones that Birgitta talked about on previous slides. So we wanted to just take some time today to walk through some examples of existing mandatory reporting frameworks. So I will kick us off with the United States mandatory reporting regulations, and then I will pass it to my colleague Lou, who will talk a little bit about the EU. And these are two very different very different systems. So it'll be interesting to compare and contrast how they're progressing. So in the United States, we had a mandatory climate reporting rule that was finalized by our US securities regulator, the SEC. So the SEC is responsible for setting rules for public companies that are listed on US exchanges, and then also really for protecting the interest of investors. And so this rule, it required reporting on climate-related financial risk and impacts, as well as sort of more broad qualitative disclosures on the management of climate-related risk. And the audience for this rulemaking was really investors. So the SEC noted that climate-related information has become increasingly important to investors, and it's increasingly having impacts on a company's financial performance. So they determined that it was their responsibility to require companies to disclose important information regarding their climate-related risks that investors would need to make decisions regarding their investments. So in 2024, the SEC issued their final climate-related reporting rule. It applied to all US public companies, and it outlined specifically the different disclosures that they needed to make and where they needed to make them. So in this case, US companies filed their annual reports to the SEC, and this would have added new information disclosures into those annual reports. And that includes their financial statements, which are a very important component of companies' SEC filings. Along with qualitative disclosures about climate-related risk, the final rule also would have required the disclosure of Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. So this rule was finalized by the prior administration, the Biden administration. However, a common theme in US policies is a constant flip-flop between administrations with different priorities. So this was finalized by the Biden administration. However, now that we are in the Trump administration and we have a new SEC, they feel quite differently about this rule. So when this rule was finalized, it was immediately challenged in court by people who thought that it went too far and that the SEC exceeded their authority in publishing it. However, with the new administration in place, they are no longer defending this rule in court. So that has led to other organizations coming in to step in and defend this final rule in the hopes that it will eventually get implemented. However, there's been quite a bit of back and forth within the courts. So the courts had asked the SEC, what are you going to do with this rule now that you're not defending it? What's the next steps? SEC asked the court to rule on the case on its merits. The court declined to do so. So we are essentially in sort of an indefinite hold with these mandatory reporting requirements, where the court will not rule on it and the SEC has stayed its implementation. So we're not really sure what the next step is going to be. At this point, nobody has to comply with this rule, but it is still technically on the books, and we could see other developments in the courts that may impact it. However, with the flip-flop that's happening at the national level, in the case with the US that we often see is that states will sort of come in and fill that regulatory gap when the national government won't. So we have seen some states propose and finalize their own mandatory reporting requirements for different companies. California is the state who has finalized this framework. So they passed two bills, SB 253 and SB 261, that would create disclosure requirements for companies doing business in California. And it includes similar qualitative disclosures as well as the disclosure of Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. However, these rules apply to all companies that are doing business in California, which is a very broad term. So it's a different scope than the SEC rule. It loops in only a subset of companies who would have been subject to the national rule. And it also is less focused on investors and more focused on just generally how companies are contributing to California's environment and the climate impacts that they're facing. And within this framework, California requires companies to report aligned with TCFD and ISSB, which are two of those frameworks that Brigitte talked about in her slides, as well as aligned with the GHG protocol. So this is an example of where a mandatory regulation is referencing these voluntary disclosure frameworks and requiring companies to comply with it. However, just like the SEC rule, the California reporting requirements are also being challenged in the courts. However, they are still planning to move forward with implementation, so the court has not ruled yet, and companies are having to prepare to begin complying starting in calendar year 2026. So in a few months, they'll have to start complying with this rule. However, there are some regulations that are still needed to clarify how you comply with this rule that we have not yet seen from California. So again, there is still quite a bit of uncertainty in how companies are going to implement this reporting regulation. So that's the general theme of the US political landscape, is often regulatory uncertainty, and that is most definitely the case with our mandatory reporting regulations. And on top of this, US companies can also be subject to the regulations of other jurisdictions. So I will pass it to my colleague Lou to talk a little bit about the EU regulations.
Thank you, Grace. Appreciate that. So I'm going to do a brief overview of what's going on in Europe as well as outside of Europe and the US. So there's this thing called the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, which is the political arm that set up the standards, the ESRS standards. And with those, I just want to say, from the very beginning, they're very ambitious. It's part of Europe's climate Green Deal. It wants to do well versus the climate. It wants to do well on sustainability issues. So to do this, it set up all sorts of requirements in terms of what you need to report, and it follows along the line of GRI and TCFD and asking, and most voluntary sustainability reporting. It's, what is the governance behind these issues? How does this fit in with your company's strategy and business model? What kinds of policies do you have in place to manage this issue? What actions are you taking, and what are your targets? So they set up, kind of this whole process, some good indicators about how you would do it. It would apply to European companies of a certain size. And then it would also apply to non-EU companies if they had a certain amount of business within the EU. So here it was this big ambitious plan, all of these indicators, all of these reporting standards applicable to European and non-European companies. And to add even a bit more complexity, it was going to be aimed at both financial and non-financial stakeholders. So Brigitte was talking before about, your impact materiality, so like what the company's impact is on the environment or on people, but also financial materiality. It's like, how do these external things, how does climate change impact the company, etc. So it's called double materiality, which I think you've discussed. So it's got a very broad remit, or it was set up to have this very broad remit, and it had 10 standards to begin with. You can see them on the slide, and it's all of the key environmental issues, all of the key social issues, and then under governance here, this could be bribery and corruption and how things are managed within the company. For this group, the oil and gas industry group, one of the things that you could see that's very common to our companies that we always talk about, it is a material issue, but doesn't show up here, is safety. And that's you within the ESRS, you have the option to have your own entity specific topic, and safety is a very common one for the extractive industries, because we all know how important that is. So that's a little bit about what was in play. The first 2024 reporting had the first wave of companies, the really large companies, the Equinors and the BPs and the Shells. They did their very first report along this regulation. While that was going on, it became very clear that this was going to be very resource intensive. It was going to be very difficult to get this information. You know, all of a sudden we're asking these companies outside of Europe to provide information to Europe, whereas no one else is asking for this information. I was at a meeting last week, and one company said that they had 100 people working on their first report and spending 30,000 hours. This is on a report. This is on a sustainability report in their annual report. So the EU had a lot of feedback that this is not good for competitiveness. This is not good in terms of, is this the best way to improve sustainability in Europe? They want to keep it, but it needs to be simplified a bit. So right now, the European Union is in the process of figuring out a way to reduce the burden. And a lot of this is that there will be fewer companies that will be in scope to report on this or report against this. And they're trying to simplify the standards in terms of what you actually have to report on. That won't come out until next year, the revised standard. So we'll see what happens here. But I think you can see it's a very big contrast with the United States, which has, one big focus, and here, Europe, we're trying to solve everything, which is great. And then you get to the next group, which is ISSB, and it's affiliated with IFRS, sorry, lots of acronyms, but this is like the financial reporting standard that many, many, many countries follow. So they have set up sustainability standards as well. And what they've done is they too have the general requirements, the same ones in terms of, what's your governance, what are your policies, what are your metrics, what's your risk, how do you manage the risk? But what they've done is they've just started off with, one key standard, and that's climate change. So they want people to think about what are the issues that are important to your investors that would make them change their mind in terms of how they're investing. But we definitely want you to report against climate. And so that means right now it's being adopted in around 17 countries. And I think as Brigitte was mentioning, each country can choose to tweak or kind of modify the regulation a little bit. And so it's all of a sudden ISSB implemented in one country is not the same, potentially not the same as ISSB in another country. So this becomes an issue when you've got ISSB in different countries, and then you've got the European version. So they're saying this is how we want you to report on how to do it. So then all of a sudden we start losing this kind of comparability. So whether you're an investor or you're an NGO and you want to look at how companies are doing, everybody's reporting slightly differently in whatever country you're in. So this is going to be I think the big challenge going forward. One of the things they always say is companies like us, we are always looking for interoperability. We need to make sure that we can report something once and hopefully use it in multiple countries. So that's kind of an idea of what the difference is between the two regulations. And again, in contrast to the United States. Can I see the next slide? I thought this one would be particularly of interest to this group because ISSB has the most, will have the most impact in Latin America compared to the European regulation and the US regulation, obviously. And what this shows is the countries that might be on this call, where you've got Brazil and Chile and Mexico, they are looking at 2025 reporting year. So reports would come out next year, and 2026, I think that's it. So they're coming soon in terms of figuring out how these will need to be implemented. One of the things on here is that you can see is the blue means that that's when the report, you have to report on that year. And the green is whether it has to be assured. And then that adds a whole other level of complexity, is whether you can have this information audited, because most financial auditors are not accustomed to this sort of information. So that's a very quick overview of what's going on in, I'm just going to say outside the US, so Europe and the rest of the world. Thank you.
Should I just start, Monica? Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria. I'm from Geopark Sustainability team. I've been invited to share with you our sustainability reporting journey, how we choose which frameworks and initiatives to adopt in our reporting cycle. My native language is Spanish, and I'm seeing a lot of participants that have Latin names. If you would like me to give the presentation in Spanish, just let me know, but there's also a translation available. So for those of you that don't know Geopark, we are a Latin American oil and gas company. We have a little bit over 23 years of experience. That makes us fairly young oil and gas company in the world. We have a particularity regarding our sustainability reporting, and that is that although we have our operations in Latin America, we are listed in the New York Stock Exchange, and our headquarters are domiciled in Spain, which makes us subject to both mandatory reporting requirements in the US and in the European Union and in Colombia. So that makes us a medium-sized oil and gas company with huge reporting requirements. Another kind of particularity that is going to come up later in the presentation is that all of our employees are also shareholders in the company. So that's a particular stakeholder that has different communication needs regarding our sustainability reporting as well. So the next one, please.
You're muted. You're muted, Maria Luisa.
There? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
So in the next slide, what you're going to see is a very brief description of what our sustainability reporting journey has been. We were listed in the New York Stock Exchange in 2014, and we had our first sustainability report in 2017. Just for clarity purposes, when you see the acronym SPEED, that's a synonym for sustainability in Geopark. SPEED is our value system that it's the equivalent of what other companies understand as sustainability. So we had our first sustainability report in 2017. What I wanted to show you in this slide is how this journey of strengthening and enhancing our sustainability reporting has been progressive and organic. And in the first 6 years, it didn't actually follow any specific strategy. Basically, what has happened is we adopted the mandatory requirements, as Grace and Brigitte said. We don't have much of a choice on that matter. You have to report. And so that was the first thing that we did. But as other stakeholders started to request further information, we started to adopt other frameworks and initiatives. As you can see here, what Geopark considers its reporting cycle includes frameworks, but also indices, rankings, reporting initiatives, not just the guidelines for reporting. So from when we started in 2017 to 2025, we had grown to about 13, 14 initiatives that include the mandatory reporting requirements, other guidelines like TCFD, TNFD, GRI, and we also including other initiatives like CDP and the radars, Sustainalytics, MSCI, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. As I said before, this didn't follow a specific plan or strategy. We just began incorporating those other initiatives because investors requested that we started reporting under CDP, for example. The radars, as many of you know, they evaluate your performance even if you don't engage with them. So you choose either to control that narrative or not. This to say that by the end of 2024, our reporting cycle had too many initiatives. It was too much. We are not a company devoted to reporting. We produce oil and gas, and we had to optimize and be more strategic about it. As you can see, in 2022, we began adopting or reporting under the European reporting requirements. By far the most comprehensive and robust of all the mandatory reporting requirements we have to comply with. That has its challenges, but it's also an opportunity because it basically incorporates every other reporting framework, GRI, SASB, most of CDP is also embedded in the European reporting requirements. Mapping out this reporting cycle in one calendar has allowed us to have more control over it. And what we decided in 2023 was we are done with being reactive and having this calendar where every month you have to answer to somebody. So what we did is we consolidated all the non-financial information that was required of us, either by mandatory requirements, frameworks, indices, radars, initiatives, into one tool, which is our SPEED Sustainability Report. That kind of had a lot of challenges, but the outcome was we have one strong, difficult reporting effort a year and not 10. And we also assure that everything that has been given to the public is the same information, is verified information, and it's one narrative. When you have different areas of a company reporting to different initiatives at different moments in time, you control the narrative. So you lose control of the narrative. So what we did is what we're doing right now is we ask for the different areas that participate in reporting to give us all the information for all of our reporting requirements in one moment in time. And we include all that information in one communication tool, which is the SPEED report. And then throughout the year, the sustainability team is responsible for providing that information to the different stakeholders that require it. Another highlight of our reporting journey is that in 2022, we began using an online platform called Mero. That was, at that moment, it was very innovative. Not many companies in Colombia or Latin America were doing it. Mero is a Colombian startup that is now handled by a consultancy firm that is used to collect, verify, and organize non-financial information for the company. We continue to use Mero, and as you can see from 2024 on, what we're doing is automatizing the information. What that means is that Mero is now being connected to other information platforms in the company, like Success Factors, like SAP, like Zafiro, so that reduces human hours that have to be devoted to digitizing the information, and also reduces the probability of human error. We are hoping that we will have 100% of our non-financial information completely automatized in the next 5 years. What has happened in 2025, as I said before, was when we started the year, our sustainability reporting cycle was too big. It had too many initiatives. Before I show you what we did to optimize and choose exactly what we're going to report and to whom, I just wanted to mention some of our success levers. Geopark is a medium-sized company. It's a young company. We're not 100 years old like some of the bigger oil and gas companies, and so we had to adapt our capacities to a huge demand of information. And so having a dedicated team just for sustainability reporting has been one of the key to our success, having a top-down approach. And this, I would say, not just for sustainability reporting, but for sustainability across the board. It has to be a mandate that comes from the top. If you can have it from the board of directors, even better. If it does not come from the top, it's not going to be a priority for the company. The objective of having a structured and visible sustainability reporting cycle was, of course, compliance with mandatory disclosure requirements, but also having control of the narrative and being able to determine what information I'm giving to whom, and also make a better use of our limited human resources. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So when we found ourselves having 13 different initiatives in our sustainability reporting cycle, we decided it was time to make strategic decisions around that. Of course, the mandatory requirements are not voluntary by definition, so we didn't include them in this analysis, and they are the baseline to what we report. Again, having to report against European requirements brings the bar very high. It's very thorough. There's a lot of information and KPIs that need to be reported. For a Latin American company, that sometimes can be a challenge, kind of translating those information requirements to Latin American realities. Sometimes it can have its challenges. I'll just mention one that keeps coming up continuously. Europe talks about previous informed consent. And what we have in the countries where we operate is consulta previa. It sounds like a grammar difference, but the difference is that in the first concept, communities have veto power, and in the second one, it does not. Just having having to report that specifically brought in the entire legal team of GeoPark into the sustainability reporting initiative. So what we did this year, taking advantage of artificial intelligence and kind of this technology incorporation that the company has been going through, is we came up with a tool to assess each of the initiatives we are participating in. Of course, mandatory frameworks, we did not have to analyze them because we know we have to report on them, but we processed through this tool every other initiative. So as I said before, MSCI, Sustainalytics, CDP, Dow Jones, Global Compact, and also other regional and national initiatives that many of you may not know if you're not from Colombia, but Índice de Inversión Social Privado, Ranking Par, a bunch of other sustainability-related initiatives that we also participate at the local and national level. So we came up with, as Grace and Brigitte said before, you need to choose, if you can, frameworks that are aligned with your stakeholder needs. But beyond that, GeoPark uses those initiatives not just to communicate and for accountability purposes, but also to enhance its own sustainability approach. So we use what MSCI, Sustainalytics, CDP, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index says about us and evaluates our performance. We use that to improve our sustainability performance. So it's not just a tool for communication, it also has a strategic value and an impact on the company's sustainability approach. So we came up with these 6 dimensions, trying to make it as objective as possible and not just a sustainability team saying, I think we should continue with this one and this one and this one. We included in this evaluation different teams of the company that either participate in gathering the information or have insights as to the impact these initiatives have on the company and on external stakeholders. So very quickly, we came up with these dimensions. Each dimension has a set of sub-criteria, and we evaluated these 13, the entire initiatives that make up our sustainability reporting cycle. Of course, it has a subjective component to it, We try to make it as objective as possible. What you're seeing at the right-hand side of the slide is the results. You won't see the names there because we don't want to kind of show which ones were graded or met the challenge of having high strategic value, high sustainability impact, high credibility and rigor. But basically, when we had these results, we knew which of those sustainability reporting initiatives, be it frameworks, indices, radars, rankings, were generating the most value to the company, and also were the ones that were being highly valued by our stakeholders. And the result of that was that we optimized our sustainability reporting cycles. Some of those initiatives, we have given up on them. We're not going to continue participating in those initiatives. We had a 58% reduction in operational workload. One of the elements that we assessed was how much human resources in hours had to be allocated to reporting. As all of you know, there are some reporting initiatives that they're just, the load is very, very, very high. And we had a reduction of 58% in the amount of hours dedicated to sustainability reporting. And the tool was so successful that other areas of the company asked us to run other types of initiatives, not necessarily related to sustainability reporting, through kind of the evaluation. We are going to continue using this tool, which was made in-house by our team every 2 or 3 years. We've kind of defined it as a sort of materiality for sustainability initiatives. So we have decided that the periodicity would be 3 years, or if something happens dramatically in the context or in the company, we would drive it through again. The next slide, please. So for any of you that want to see how we materialize our reporting efforts, is the Speed Sustainability Report, which is in our webpage. As I said before, that report consolidates all the non-financial information requirements that are made to us either by regulators, investors, or other stakeholders. But as you all also know, a sustainability report does not fit the needs of all our stakeholders. For GeoPark, the SPEED report has a primary objective, which is compliance with mandatory requirements. And then we have come up with different ways to communicate our sustainability information to other stakeholders. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges I guess every company in the world has is balancing regulatory compliance with meaningful stakeholder and communication. What we realized very early on is that a sustainability report does not equal meaningful stakeholder communication. For us, the sustainability report is the main source of information, but not the only channel of information. And that has been one of the levers of success, is having one source of information that would reduce the possibility of giving misinformation to the public, of giving out different narratives to different stakeholders, but assuring that we have the appropriate channels or tailor-made channels and tailor-made language for each of our prioritized stakeholders. So of course, there are risks associated with mandatory reporting, and we have seen this grow exponentially over the last years. One of the first things we did was merge our reporting calendar with our engagement calendar. So our sustainability reporting cycle is aligned with our sustainability communication plan. And they feed off of each other. Having the communication team completely aligned with us and us with them has also been a key of success. And that may sound intuitive, but many companies do not incorporate or do not engage with their communication teams when producing sustainability information. For us, for Geopark, one of the keys of success has been developing everything in tandem with the communication team. Again, having one source but multiple channels reduces legal risks associated with mandatory reporting, but also helps in having one single narrative. Involving the legal team, which has been a fairly new addition to our reporting system. Our legal team now reviews and approves everything that goes into the sustainability report. And that goes in tandem with the external verification that also that the report also has. And we have what we call engagement by design in compliance. Which is, although the speed report is a tool for regulatory compliance, we also involve other stakeholders in the production of that report. So, of course, following the double materiality as a table of contents for our reporting, getting feedback from our stakeholders from that report in particular, understanding what works, what doesn't work. If you see the evolution of our sustainability reports, every year there's something different, trying to incorporate lessons learned and things that our stakeholders are not seeing and want to see in our reporting. Again, because we are in Latin America, we have it's not a particularity just for Latin American countries, but in Colombia, there's a high diversity of stakeholders with different needs, different expectations, and very high expectations. So again, thinking of only one channel to communicate in our experience is a mistake. You need to have multi-channel communication plans, active and effective grievance mechanisms. In Colombia in particular, you need to have them available in different indigenous languages for more local and regional stakeholders. And as much as you can and within your capacity, have those sustainability communication plans tailor-made for each stakeholder. So you have to be able to give the same information in different formats and in different languages to specific stakeholders, and that is a huge challenge. And then you also have to have compliance by design in engagement. What does that mean? That all that legal jargon, all the KPIs, all the rigor that you have in your sustainability report that has the objective of mandatory regulatory compliance, you need to be able to translate that to each stakeholder without losing its rigor. You need to be able to say the same things and still be in compliance with reporting regulations while communicating to local authorities, suppliers and contractors, investors, your neighbors, communities, and your partners. And then something else that we have seen is in the last few years are opportunities derived from artificial intelligence. We have seen this as an opportunity mainly. If you control the source of the information, then you control the risks associated with the quality and the quantity of information that you're sending to the audience. And artificial intelligence has helped us because it has given us a universe of different tools and mechanisms we can use to communicate. It has increased our response capacity, and it has reduced the time it takes us to respond to any particular kind of information demand from our stakeholders. Next slide, please. And to finalize, and this is something that we highlight in every presentation, is that reporting and communicating is not a means, is not an end, it's a means. You don't report for reporting's sake, you don't communicate for communication's sakes. In Geopark, transparency, as you can see, is actually one of our material issues. Ethics and transparency was prioritized by most of our stakeholders, including the company. And so for us, communication is for something else, is to build transparency, is to build trust with our different stakeholders. And in that sense, that gives us the objective. So going back to reporting requirements, as you can see, there are different objectives for different stakeholders. For regulators, it's compliance. But in our case, for our employees, we want to motivate them, we want to inspire them, we want to showcase how they participate in the growth of the company. With investors, we want to let them know how we are creating value for them and what we're doing with their resources. We also want our partners to feel that we are a solid partner, that they can trust us, that we can develop operations together. So the objectives are very specific for each stakeholder. And then when you kind of mix that with what the corporate identity is, what our history is. We are a very particular oil and gas company with a value system that has been part of our DNA since day one. We have specific company milestones. We have a corporate strategy that it's unique to us. And then you have to integrate into that the sustainability approach and priorities, which for us are double materiality and the prioritized stakeholders. And then mix that with all the tools available to communicate and to engage. Again, highlighting that the sustainability report should not be the only mechanism to communicate on non-financial information to stakeholders. In this sense, because it is such a complex endeavor, not just coming up with a very comprehensive and rigorous sustainability report, but being able to communicate that information to different stakeholders in different formats, having KPIs, internal KPIs that are aligned with that communication plan and that monitor its execution has been key to our success. If you don't monitor, if you don't have metrics to determine your success, then you're really not you're not going to improve, and you're not going to know if you're doing things the way your stakeholders are expecting you to do them. Specifically for employees and for local communities, integrating that sustainability communication plan with other activities related to capacity building on topics like human rights, like climate change, like labor conditions has been key also for us. And again, company leadership. The best communicators in Geopark have been our board of directors, our CEO, our C-level. They have recognition, they have the platforms, they have credibility, and if they are on board and they are willing to communicate to specific stakeholders, that has been, that is also a key of success, if you have that. Not every leader is a good communicator, and that also has to be said, but we can learn. That's it. That has been our experience. Next year, our speed sustainability report will reflect the optimization of our sustainability reporting cycle, and then in a couple of years, we'll let you know how it went.
Okay, this is fantastic. Thank you very much, Maria Luisa, for that. And here, let me introduce my friend and partner, Good, to share with us the key takeaways from this experience, and working internally on this has been quite an amazing project. Good.
Thank you very much, Monica. Hello, everyone. Again, my task is easy now because all these insightful presentations from these speakers, I'll very briefly touch upon some of the key takeaways that we have heard in this presentation. So in the first part, we heard about the rapidly evolving landscape in sustainability reporting, and specifically for our industry, we face a complex and changing landscape of frameworks and regulations. Brigitte, Lou, and Grace told you all about these different frameworks and standards. And we also have heard that stakeholder expectations are rising. So even with the US regulation on hold and EU regulation being streamlined, stakeholders are still wanting more information on critical issues as rigorous as financial data. So with the landscape changing so quickly, the question is, how do companies decide which frameworks to use? And that brings us to the importance of strategic framework selection. I think Maria's presentation from Geopark was really, really insightful. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for voluntary reporting. You as companies, you should select the frameworks that best align with your business objectives and stakeholder needs. But as we have heard from Maria, our stakeholder umbrella is very wide. So it's not only investors, it's not only communities, it includes NGOs, indigenous peoples, and your own workforce as well. So it's important that you do this mapping and identify your frameworks to follow. And in that, materiality assessments and cross-framework alignment are essential for consistency and credibility. And the example from Geopark was really spot on that one. If your company falls within the scope of one of the sustainability reporting regulations, the challenge is to balance the regulatory compliance with the meaningful stakeholder-focused communication and engagement. Their integration kicks in, and it's integration of communication, leadership involvement, and clear KPIs. These are critical levers. But as we have heard, both choosing or applying a framework or a standard and then publishing your report is not just about ticking the box. It's about creating value and how it fits in your strategy. So reporting on your sustainability performance enhances transparency, it's accountability and stakeholder engagement. It also supports your risk management, improve access to capital, but as Maria mentioned, it strengthens your long-term business resilience. If you want to hear more about the benefits of sustainability reporting or materiality assessments, I'll just reflect back to Monica, our first slide, that we have 2 webinars we hold with this group, again, with these associations last year. Please listen those webinars if you haven't done so. Last but not least, it's important to remember that reporting is not one-off task. It's an iterative journey. As we have heard in this webinar, companies are moving toward automation, external verification, double materiality analysis, and alignment among the frameworks. Our message there, and we encourage you, is to start early if you haven't done so. Start small and improve year by year. This will help you build maturity over time. And final reminder is that this is not the job of a single team. It takes collaboration across the whole company, as you have heard from Geopark's example. I have already seen some questions coming in, so I'll now hand over to Monica to facilitate the Q&A. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. This has been quite an immersive experience, and I'm very happy to share all of this with you. Well, there are a few questions here that are interesting. About the recording will be available. Yes. Actually, all of us as partners in this, we have it in our websites. And as Dwigu mentioned, it is very important that to make you aware, probably you're familiar. If not, we have created a series exclusively about sustainability reporting, and we start navigating about why sustainability reporting, what is materiality and double materiality. And today we try to answer the question that many people have, is that how should I choose and pick the right framework that answer the questions imposed by my stakeholders? And we hear from Birgitta and from Maria Luisa, it has to be customized, and standards will reflect on the questions that pose, and changes are coming into that. Another of the questions come is, cuando mencionan que cada empresa debe ver información, es la más relevante para sí misma, se refiere al análisis de materialidad. Is any of you wants to answer this question when they talk about the information being relevant for stakeholders? Is this based on the materiality analysis? Who would like to pick that question? Maria Luisa, perhaps you...
So, yes, we guide ourselves with the double materiality results. We go to the kind of the specific level of the risks, impacts, and opportunities that were identified throughout the double materiality analysis and that are aligned with one material issue or not. So we do have kind of that table where we have the prioritized stakeholders, and we know what are the most relevant issues for each of those stakeholders, and we make like we try to focus on that specifically. For regulators, the guidelines are the reporting requirements.
Yeah.
And for investors, we guide ourselves with what the raters and the rankings are asking in the questionnaires.
Yeah. And it's very interesting what you just mentioned, because as we heard already from Birgit at the beginning, I don't know, Birgit, if you want to participate here. We're talking about, and even the transition is interesting, no? You see the 2023, you see up in demand of SASB, more comparable to the UN SDGs, and the financial industry and creditors are paying special attention to this. So if you can share a little bit about your views on this, precisely on the interest of these particular stakeholders.
On the investor stakeholders or the...
Yes, like the investor community. When you were showing your chart, we see that 2022, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were still top. In 2023, we see SASB going up, and you were mentioning about how the frameworks answer different questions. So it will be really interesting helping to complete the answer.
I think I would actually start with saying that in a way, sustainability reporting, following sustainability reporting for actually almost 20 years now, then it's actually so that it's been evolving from being in a bit two separate worlds. So you had more like a parallel impact reporting, kind of identifying what impact do you have on the planet, on the society, on the people. And that was allowed to kind of just walk the line on its own. And then on a separate part, you see and stakeholders, investors, and the capital markets that are trying to achieve a better and deeper understanding of the companies that they are investing in, back to also the perspective of identifying risks. So then I also said, knowledge is power. So the thing is that when things are moving then and developing, then you could see that the trend, at least for following sustainability reporting, is that they started to combine. It was not just looking at the impact for sustainability reporting. It was also taking into consideration the broader perspective of information that the stakeholders as investors are also needing and wanting. They want this information. So combining that and seeing that, for, like Lou mentioned as well, one of the core functions in the EU ESRS that we have now seen in Europe, and we were reporting for the first time the first wave companies, we saw that they were taking that core stand and saying the core of that sustainability, you are doing double materiality. You are looking at what impact do you have on the outside world, but you're also looking at what is affecting you as a company from the outside and in. So bringing that into harmonizing also in a way, not just framework with framework and making sure that these frameworks are starting to align with each other, you're also seeing that you are looking more on the interconnectivity between the classic impact reporting and the more risk identifying and looking at how financial effects are on the companies and how investors are also eager to better understand, I would say, better understand a company at a deeper level and eager to get more information into their decision making. And that's definitely what we've seen. But that, of course, SASB has been also ongoing for quite some years, and ISSB has been driving that perspective. It was established in 2021, the ISSB, to develop the comprehensive global baseline for sustainability disclosure standards that they are now working very on, spreading kind of around also in the national regulatory requirements, as I spoke to, and was also mentioned that you do see this because EU and ESRS is in the European setting, but ISSB is definitely on a global scale. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I would definitely say that the interest in this information is very high on the agenda from investors.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think that you explaining a little bit of the context on that, it helps everybody to see why it's becoming so top on the agenda, and the ISSB coming also into that. We have another couple of questions, and this is specifically, Maria Luisa, it highlights about the case of indigenous consultation, and they talk about the FPIC. And here we need to probably explain a little bit that many countries in the world have adopted ILO 169, and that's defined consulta previa, and other countries have agreed with the UNDRIP, which goes on the veto power. And you explained beautifully, which many companies and people get so confused, what is the difference between one and both. So here the question goes around, ¿puedes compartir un poco más cómo has trabajado el tema de consulta previa FPIC, sobre todo en el tema de reporte? ¿Cómo lo has llevado? Y tienes otra pregunta después para qué.
Okay. So what we chose to do, and if you go into our speed report, you can see it, is we went all in the chapter of neighbor relations. We have a sub-chapter completely devoted to consulta previa, to give all the details of how many we carry out during the year, with which communities, in which stage they are, and of course, providing the legal description of what consulta previa is in the countries where we operate. We had the choice of kind of glossing over it or going all in and explaining to our stakeholders what exactly is consulta previa for Geopark, which is different from free, prior, informed consent. That said, in the speed report, we also have specific web pages for each of our assets, where you can find the environmental license, all of the legal procedures detailed. It's called Buenos Vecinos, and you can choose which asset you want to consult. And that kind of small web page, or not small, it's connected to the Geopark general web page, but it's specific for the legal environmental aspects of each asset. So if you are you have a more specific interest in that consultation process, you can go to Buenos Vecinos, and you can have all of the legal documents are there. And then for answering the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, MSCI, and all this, which always refer to free, prior, informed consent, is we explain what we do from a consulta previa point of view, and we always have this legal disclaimer that our legal team verifies, where we explain that consulta previa, probably the analysts that review the Dow Jones are not very happy with us, but we always include the disclaimer, because it can lead to misunderstandings, and if you're not clear about that, you're not telling the truth.
Well, and one element that probably will be key to highlight now that we are talking about Europe, the reporting and listed in the US and so on, is that most parts of the world, they have been very familiar with the UNDRIP, which is precisely the consent as a veto power. And very rarely people understand the convention of the ILO 169, which is mostly had been adopted in Latin America and some countries in Africa. So that that is something that comes into a complexity in communicating when one stops where. And another element that I will just try to jump and help here is the role of the state here is very different too. In some part of the world, you will find that indigenous peoples are considered and they have legal rights on the land, so therefore consent applied fully. And some parts, mostly in Latin America, we have so many irregular settlers that are in land that belong to the state or belong to nobody. So obviously this was the consulta has to stop because they don't have land rights. It is complex. We can talk a lot about that, but Maria, I loved how you presented and how you guys specifically present each asset and the good effort that you do. Last question for you here from audience, you're in demand, is about the languages. How many languages are you using to communicate and the reporting and the processes?
The speed report, English and Spanish. And then at the local level, through the grievance mechanisms, we have a mechanism called Cuéntame, which is for neighbors, local authorities, and contractors. We are working with Spanish and 4 other native languages. And there's an additional complexity in that there are several of those languages that are not written. They're only spoken. So that makes it a bit more complex. Those languages are spoken in Los Llanos Orientales in Colombia and Putumayo.
Okay. And here they're talking about the impact on human rights. And basically the question goes, ¿cómo reportan los impactos en derechos humanos? ¿Están integrados transversalmente en los temas materiales y disclosure de GRI? ¿O se presentan como un tema capítulo independiente en derechos humanos?
Both. So we have a specific chapter on human rights where we present our human rights system, the general results of our human rights impact assessments in all our controlled operations. We do that every 4 years. Or when a new asset comes into the company. And we also have specific impacts, risks identified as part of our material issues. So there are human rights related impacts and risks associated with climate change, with energy transition, with responsible supply chain management, and we address those in the chapters. But there's also a specific chapter for the human rights system in our Speed Sustainability Report and in our webpage.
Fantastic. I have one question that I think that will help to enrich, and this is for Lou. Lou, when you were talking, when you were doing your presentation, you were talking about how the ISSB is becoming an interesting framework, and how important is for some countries even the fact that it can be adjusted to the local context. So, and very interesting. Quite a few countries in the region in Latin America. I was just taking notes here because I couldn't resist. Brazil, Mexico, even Bolivia, which has a quite intensive extractive activity. Costa Rica also are part of that. What is exactly that piece of adapting, and who is adapting, and how does it work?
So it's what is happening is that national governments are adapting. So Australia has implemented ISSB, and they have said we want to do it this way. It's almost like the ISSB standard, but we've modified it slightly. One of the requirements of ISSB, the standard, is you shall consider SASB, which are these sustainable standards. The UK is saying, well, we don't want the shall consider, we want it to be may consider. So it's very different. You don't really have to look at SASB if you don't want to. So from a country perspective, basically a national government is listening to its stakeholders, its companies, its NGOs, and saying, this is what we want. And so they're responding for Brazil, for Mexico, that sort of thing. But if you're a company, you're then having to do if you're a multinational company, rather, you're then having to do it the Australian way, the United Kingdom way, the Mexican way. So that's a big discussion that Ipieca is having with ISSB, saying, you know, think about it from the company implementation perspective as well. That it you know, all of these just very minor tweaks, minor adjustments could mean a completely different report for a company if you change the boundary some way. So I think it has good intent, but it's probably has the potential to not be very helpful for companies.
Well, I would love to ask Birgit how, because you're in Brazil, so you are really living that piece of precisely with operations in different countries around the world, adopting this and how this translates into your reporting.
Who are you asking?
To Birgit.
Oh,
You
yeah,
have many
so
listeners.
I'm thinking that due to our activities in Brazil.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's the best example to bridge here that Brazil adopted, you report globally, and you are in Europe. So it's a whole different story. Yeah.
I think the short answer to that is to actually explain how complex it's getting and why we're really, really eager to have a harmonized framework across and now being sitting in that situation where we also have had quite comprehensive work structuring our report in accordance with the EU ESRS reporting, and also taking into consideration this involvement of ISSB. It is something that we really need to adapt to, but it's also to make sure we use the arenas where we can connect with our peers, also securing that this is still useful and that we don't, as Lou is saying, it deviate to too many directions, yeah, and it's not getting too fragmented. So I think that's definitely also Luisa Maria was speaking of the challenging of too many narratives, that you have one narrative due to that framework, you have one narrative due to that framework. The annual cycle is a bit different. That can also be in relation to management reports. So you can also have different jurisdictions that say, oh, the reporting is starting at the middle of the year. It's not like for us, but so there you have so many complex parts in this. So it's heavy work doing reporting, sustainable reporting, but it's an excellent way to understand your company better. So I think that needs to be said, that really getting a grasp on this is also getting to know the company better and better and better, and using as a tool as well to make sure that information becomes useful information and strengthen that. Yeah, I think that's it.
This is great. And room for Maria Luisa to close this.
Monica, just a correction, because I wasn't sure on the data I gave you. We are currently working with English, Spanish, and 8 indigenous languages, and we are incorporating there. Not all of them are already incorporated into our grievance mechanisms. We're working on it, just to highlight kind of the diversity of.
That is amazing. This speaks of transparency and clarity of the principles and the values of Geopark. Well, and with this, we reach the top of the hour, 11:30 Eastern time. Thank you, everybody. This has been quite an extraordinary opportunity to bring that spaghetti soup that all of you guys are working on, and as Birgit and I will borrow your words, we need a standardized one that helps companies to speak the same language and helps the stakeholders to understand where all of these, the good effort and the hard work that companies are doing to improve best practice and all. To my friends in Ipieca, to my friends in IPI, Grace, thank you so much. To my friends in IOGP, and to all my friends and colleagues in Arpel, thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos por acompañarlos. Esto está disponible en nuestro canal de YouTube y va a estar en todos los websites. This is going to be in all the websites on our partners. And we really look forward that you can benefit from this or share with your colleagues if they have questions about the work that is around sustainability reporting. To all of you, have a beautiful day. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias desde las Américas. Bye.
Muchas gracias. Adiós.
Oh,
Chao.
gracias a todos. Abrazos. Chao.